It was supposed to be a peaceful Christmas dinner. My son stood across the table, his hands trembling. Then, without a word, he flung a glass of red wine straight into my face. The room fell silent. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at him and smiled. Because what no one in that room knew was that I had come prepared. Hidden in my coat pocket was a gift, not wrapped in ribbons, but bound by truth. And when I handed it to his wife, everything changed. This is not just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens when the quiet one finally strikes back. I wore the red silk dress because it made me feel like I belonged. Not the expensive kind, just soft, second-hand, tailored to fit me like a whisper. I curled my hair, brought 2 homemade pies, and even wrapped the gifts in silver paper like Mom used to do. I walked into my sister-in-law's home that evening with a heart full of effort, not expectation. That's the difference between someone who still believes and someone who's already learned. I hadn't learned yet. The fireplace flickered. Laughter echoed. Everyone turned their heads, smiled politely, then turned away. Jake didn't look up. My 18-year-old son sat on the edge of the couch, scrolling through his phone like I didn't exist. I had texted him 3 times that week. He left all of them on read. I took a breath, walked over, placed a small gift in his lap, a leather-bound journal embossed with his initials. "Thought you might want to start the year writing things down," I said, soft, hopeful. He glanced at it. "No, thank you." Just a blink, a grunt, and he dropped it beside the couch like it was junk mail. My cheeks burned, but I smiled. I moved on to the others. I gave Mom a scarf I'd knitted during a 3-month depressive lull. She clutched it like I'd handed her a paper towel. My younger brother, Dean, got a framed photo of us as kids. He raised an eyebrow and said, "Wow, throwback," before tossing it onto a side table. Their wives barely looked at me. Someone passed a wine bottle. Jake poured himself a glass. I said nothing, until I did. "You know," I began, laughing nervously, "I still remember when you were 6 and spilled grape juice all over your new khakis. You cried for an hour, even though no one was mad at you." Jake froze. The wine glass hung midair. "That was cute," I added, still smiling. "You were always so sensitive about messes." He stood up. There are moments, I would later think, that split time in 2, before the wine and after. Jake didn't yell. He didn't raise a fist. He simply flung the wine, dark, red, deliberate, into my face. The splash was immediate, warm, soaking my silk dress, dripping down my neck. Gasps, laughter cut, a fork dropped, and I stood still. My fingers twitched, but I didn't wipe my face. I looked at him. He stared back with something feral in his eyes, and in that moment, something shifted in me. A long hallway of memory unlocked. Years of Christmases where I cooked but wasn't thanked. Years of being too much or too little. Years of being asked for money, then silence. I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. That was their game. Mine would come later. At home, I stripped the dress off and placed it in the sink. The red bled like a wound. I watched the water swirl pink, then clear, then pink again. I sat down, legs still shaking, and opened my phone. 10 missed calls from unknown numbers, none from Jake, but one group notification blinked. "Family Xmas," it read. No photo of me in the group icon, no mention of me in the messages, just dad jokes, food pics, and a long string of heart emojis after a selfie of Mom and Dean's kids. I scrolled further. "Dean, glad Claire didn't bring that weird vegan thing this year." Mom, let's keep this chat just us, okay? Jake, El Mayo, she still thinks we want her around. The room spun. My vision blurred, not with tears, but with clarity. I wasn't excluded by accident. I was removed by design. I scrolled again. A pinned message from 6 months ago. Mom, if she ever asks for help again, remind her what she did to us. What I did. That night, I opened my journal and wrote just 5 words. They erased me on purpose. But there was one more message, one that didn't belong in that chat. Jake, I told her I was broke. She still wouldn't sell the house. Mom, next time be smarter. Guilt doesn't work on her anymore. Dean, tell her we'll go no contact for real this time. She'll cave eventually. And then it clicked. They'd tried to manipulate me into selling the only asset I had left. My father's cabin, left in my name after the divorce. I had refused. Not out of courage, but fear. Fear of losing them. But now I'd already lost them. And when you have nothing left to lose, you begin. The call came at 1:04 a.m. I was still awake, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of cold tea and a blank journal page. I hadn't slept since the wine incident. My body was tired, but my mind refused to rest. So when the phone buzzed in the quiet of the night, I flinched. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Claire? A whisper, a tremble. Yes, it's Emma. The voice broke into a sob. Emma, my sister-in-law, Dean's wife, the one who never looked me in the eye. The one who laughed a little too quickly when Dean joked about my meltdown phase last year. I don't know who else to call, she said. I stood, heart thudding. Are you okay? No, I'm not, she cried, really cried. Not the kind you can mute with a tissue or mask with a polite apology. Her breath hitched like a child. Her words came in gasps. I can't take it anymore. I can't breathe in that house. Dean watches everything, my phone, my email. He reads my bank statements. My hands clenched around the phone. Emma, did something happen tonight? She paused. Then, he slapped me because I forgot to record a transaction. Silence, thick, full, endless. I'm sorry, she said. I know I shouldn't be telling you this. You're the last person he wants me talking to. He says you're poison. I exhaled slowly. And what do you think? I think you're the only one who didn't pretend I was invisible. Something inside me softened, then cracked. Do you need help? Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. Yes, but there's more. The shift in her tone was so sharp, it made my skin prickle. I didn't want to tell you this, but I think you deserve to know. I sat back down. Last year, she began, Jake came to Dean, said he needed help applying for a loan to start a business. Dean said no. But then Jake asked me. He said you'd already agreed to co-sign it, that he just needed my signature to process it faster. My mouth dried. What? I was young and stupid. I trusted him. He was your son. I didn't think he'd lie. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I remembered the strange bank statement I received, one I'd chalked up to a system glitch. I remembered asking Jake about it. He'd laughed, said I worried too much. He forged your approval, Emma said, voice flat now. He used your name. And when I asked about it a few months ago, Dean told me to shut up, said it was family business. My chest constricted. Claire, she whispered, he's not just hurting you, he's ruining you. We didn't speak for a long time. Only the soft static of 2 women breathing across a line that had never been safe before. Then I heard it, her quiet sobs, and my own. We cried, not for what had been done, but for what we had allowed. for how long we'd made ourselves small, for all the things we hadn't said sooner. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I'm not," I replied, "because now I know." Later, when the line went dead, I sat in the silence. The tea had gone cold long ago. The journal page remained blank, but something inside me had filled. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank's online portal, navigated to the savings account my mother had offered to manage for emergencies. Balance, fortitrito, my hands went numb. I checked the transaction history. 3 years ago, I'd deposited $9,800 from my divorce settlement. The withdrawals began slowly, small at first, then larger, consistent. I traced the transfers to a linked account, Dean's name. I checked again. The same account was connected to a crypto trading platform, and that's when the pieces clicked into place. Dean had been funneling my money I gave Mom to protect from Jake, into his own investments, and those investments had failed. The same year he suddenly stopped paying for Emma's car. The same year he begged Mom to ask me for help with the mortgage. No one had ever protected me. I closed the laptop and stared at the black screen. My reflection looked older than I remembered. I could call the bank. I could call the police. I could send screenshots. I could expose everything tonight, but I didn't. Not yet. Because this time I wanted it to count. I wanted the truth to arrive like thunder, not drizzle. They had erased me carefully, quietly. Now it was my turn to write myself back in, loud, sharp, undeniable. If you had found out your family stole from you, lied to you, used your name to fuel their empire of control, would you stay silent for the sake of blood, or would you choose justice? I started with the voice memos, not because they were the most damning, but because they were mine, my weapon, my record, my truth. Every time Jake called me and hung up before speaking, every voicemail from Mom guilting me about being distant, I saved them. At the time, I didn't know why. Maybe I just needed proof that I wasn't imagining things. Maybe I hoped that one day someone would believe me. Now I believed myself. I went through my email inbox next, searched terms I used to ignore: urgent, payment, signature. I found PDFs from years back, one where Dean requested temporary access to a shared financial account after Dad's funeral. I had signed it, not understanding it gave him full access. My stomach dropped. This had started much earlier than I thought. I opened the bank export, line by line, amount by amount, all leading to the same place. Then came the footage. My mother's house had outdoor cameras installed after a break-in scare 2 years ago. Dean handled the tech. He never realized I had admin access from when I helped set it up. I logged in and watched. 1 month ago, Dean walking out of the garage carrying stacks of documents, then coming back 10 minutes later, holding my mother's iPad. 3 weeks ago, Jake arriving late at night, alone, 30 minutes inside. He left with 2 envelopes. 2 nights ago, Christmas Eve, Emma crying on the porch. Mom opened the door, didn't hug her, didn't even let her in. Just handed her a bag and shut the door. Secrets don't whisper. They linger. I took screenshots, saved timestamps, compiled folders, each labeled not by name, but by weight. Trust, theft, silence. It wasn't enough to know. I had to build a case airtight enough to leave no room for spin. No one could call this a misunderstanding. I needed to know more. That's when I visited the government's public benefit portal. Just curiosity at first. I typed in Mom's full name, her social security number. I still had it memorized from when I helped with her taxes. Status, active recipient. Aid category, independent elderly. But she wasn't living alone. She was living with Dean. And that wasn't just dishonest, it was insurance fraud. I sat back in my chair. They'd lied for years. Not just to me, but to the system. And they were good at it. I shut the laptop. It was too much. The noise, the shame, the rage. I needed a breath, a moment. So I drove back to the old neighborhood. The house Dad built, now empty, dust-covered, but still holding fragments of my childhood. The windows were shut, the driveway cracked, but the mailbox still there. Inside, a small rusted key, taped beneath a loose brick, just where he'd always kept it. I unlocked the garage, stepped into the cold, and there it was, my father's tool bench, still covered in sawdust, still smelling like pine and sweat. In the top drawer, beneath old screws and keys, a shoebox. I opened it. Letters, dozens, all addressed to me, all unsent. I sat on the concrete floor and read. His handwriting had always been neat, steady. Claire, I know they treat you unfairly. I tried to speak up, but they say I'm playing favorites. I see you, I always have. Please don't let them make you feel small. By the third letter, I couldn't see through the tears. Dad had known. He just hadn't known how to stop them. But I did. Back home, I opened a new email thread. 3 recipients. A lawyer I'd been referred to through a friend in recovery. A financial journalist. And Jason. Jason had once been the love of my life. We'd met during college, drifted apart, then back again. He was now a reporter, the kind who made powerful men nervous. He picked up on the second ring. Claire, I need your help. He listened, didn't interrupt. When I finished, he sighed. You're poking a hive full of hornets. I know. They'll sting. I'm ready. He paused. Then let's begin. Over the next week, I shared everything. Financial documents, video clips, screenshots, letters. He helped me organize the evidence into a timeline, clear, legal, undeniable. The lawyer confirmed that if I pressed charges, there'd be consequences, serious ones, but the longer I waited, the more at risk I'd be. Emotionally, financially, legally. Jason, ever careful, asked, "What's your endgame?" "Truth," I replied. "And safety for me, for Emma, for anyone else who might be stuck." Then I wrote one last file, a PDF titled Break the Pattern. It contained everything I knew, not for court, but for Emma. She needed to see the full picture. I emailed it to her with one line, "Read this only if you're ready to leave him." 3 hours later, she replied, one sentence, "Let's burn it all down." I sent the invitations by hand, not digital, not casual, handwritten cards with gold trim and red ink. Christmas brunch, Claire's place, December 22nd, a small gathering for closure. The word closure does wonders on guilty minds. It makes them think you're done fighting. It makes them come. They came. Jake arrived first, wearing a smug grin and a leather jacket I'd bought him 2 birthdays ago. Dean followed, laughing too loud, already halfway into a bottle of something. Emma walked in last, eyes down, silent. Mom didn't say hello, just looked around like she was casing the place for exits. I greeted each of them with calm. I had practiced the smile, measured, neutral, not too warm, not too cold, just enough to keep them from suspecting. We sat around the table, the fireplace crackling behind us. The food was simple: roasted vegetables, cranberry stuffing, pumpkin bread, my version of peace offerings. "You look put together," Mom said, as if it were an accusation. "I am," I replied. Halfway through the meal, a knock at the door. "Ah," I said, rising. "Must be the delivery." Jake scoffed. You ordered dessert? In a way. I opened the door and welcomed in a man dressed in a pressed gray suit, holding a red velvet box and a leather folder. Claire Morgan, he asked loudly. Yes, I said, matching his volume. He stepped in. Per your request. He handed the velvet box to Emma. She hesitated, then took it. The folder went to Jake, another envelope to Dean, and finally one for Mom. They looked at each other, confused. Emma opened hers first. Her hands trembled. Inside, divorce paperwork, a prepaid attorney retainer, a printed transcript of Jake's loan fraud confession, pulled from one of my memos. Her breath caught. Then she stood. I'm divorcing him, she said softly. Effective today. Dean snorted. What the hell is this? Jake ripped open his folder, his face drained. What the hell is wrong with you? He hissed. You're holding proof, I said, still standing. Of what you did, of what you all did. Dean's voice cracked. You tricked us? No, I said. You did that yourselves. Mom flipped through her envelope. Photos, screenshots, bank transfers, a document highlighting her benefit fraud. Her hand flew to her mouth. Claire, she whispered, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Then it happened. Jake rose, fists clenched, face red. You're not my mother. I looked at him. My son, now a stranger? I smiled. Correct. Silence. Emma stepped away from the table, holding the box like a shield. You said you loved me, she told Jake. He said nothing. Dean muttered, You've ruined everything. I turned toward the window. Outside, the man in the gray suit waited beside a black car. A quiet signal. The cameras were rolling. Jason had set it up discreetly. For documentation, for safety, for the story. Everything I've done, I said, was to survive you. Jake lunged forward, but Dean pulled him back. For once, Dean did something useful. You'll pay for this, Jake spat. No, I said, calm. You already have. Mom's voice cracked. Claire, we're family. Then you should have acted like it. The man in the gray suit re-entered. Shall I escort them out? I nodded. One by one they left. Jake fuming, Dean cursing, Mom crying. Emma stayed. When the door closed, I collapsed into a chair. The room was warm, quiet, still. Emma sat across from me. Are you okay? She asked. I'm not sure yet. A few hours later, Jason texted me a link. The article was live. How one woman exposed a family web of greed. It exploded overnight. The story hit the local news first, then national, then global. People shared their own tales of family betrayal in the comments. Hashtags bloomed. My inbox flooded with strangers saying, thank you. The footage from the brunch, carefully edited, legally cleared, aired 3 nights later. I watched it alone, knees tucked to my chest. There I was, standing in my living room, handing truth to the people who feared it most. The next morning my phone rang. Claire Morgan, a voice asked. Yes. I'm calling on behalf of the estate of Robert Hastings, your former husband. His attorney has instructions to transfer partial assets to you, as per his final amendment. I couldn't speak. The man waited, then politely ended the call. I set the phone down and wept, not from pain, not from grief, but because for the first time in years I felt seen. The fallout wasn't immediate. It never is. Public shame arrives slowly, first as denial, then disbelief, then the crack of something breaking under your own weight. Within a week, my mother received a formal notice from the Department of Human Services. Fraud investigation, benefit recovery, a number with more zeros than she could hide behind. She left me a voicemail, just sobs, no words. I didn't call back. Dean listed his house 3 days later. A quick cash sale. No inspections, no questions asked. Rumor was he owed money to investors who didn't like being lied to. He stopped posting on social media altogether. Emma said he moved in with a friend, sleeping on a couch he once made fun of me for owning. Jake's university issued a temporary suspension pending investigation into the forged loan documents. They found more inconsistencies than I had. His scholarship was revoked. His friends went quiet. His Instagram disappeared. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I lit no candles, drank no champagne. I just sat with the silence and let the dust settle around me. One morning, a small white envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, no stamp, hand-delivered. Inside was a short letter, printed, unsigned. Claire, you don't know me, but I knew your father. I worked with him for 14 years. He once told me you were the strongest person in his life, but that your family never saw it. I wanted you to know you weren't crazy. I saw what they did to you. I watched it happen. I couldn't speak up then. I'm sorry. You've inspired me to speak now. Thank you. I held the paper in my hands like it was something sacred. I didn't know who had written it, but it didn't matter. Someone had seen. And that seeing, that quiet witness, meant more than any headline. It reminded me, justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives in whispers. And maybe blood isn't the only bond worth honoring. If you're reading this, if you've ever chosen silence for the sake of family, ask yourself if protecting them meant erasing you. Let me say it plainly. Justice doesn't come from blood. It comes from truth. The truth rippled. Within days, I began receiving emails, hundreds, subject lines like, "Thank you, you told my story. I thought I was alone." Women from everywhere, sisters, mothers, daughters, all writing the same thing in different ways. You helped me see it wasn't my fault. One wrote, "I watched your clip on the news. I left my husband that night." Another, "Your story gave me the strength to confront my mother. I never realized how much she'd been controlling my life." A third, "I sent your article to my daughter. She cried. Then she packed her bags." I responded to as many as I could, sometimes just with a heart, sometimes with a full reply, but always with this: "You are not alone." Emma, too, transformed. She started a group called Women Leaving Quietly. Not loud protests, not revenge, just safe spaces for escape, for clarity, for healing. She hosted meetings in bookstores, parks, Zoom rooms. She became something I never expected, a lighthouse. She once told me, "You didn't just save me, you reminded me who I was before him." Jason kept writing. His article grew into a series, then into a book deal. He asked me to consult on a documentary they were developing, Gaslighted by Blood. "You'd be the perfect voice," he said. "The truth from the inside." I thought about it. I even drafted a few pages. But when the time came to sign, I said no. "Why?" he asked. "Because I'm done being a character in someone else's story," I replied. "I want to write mine." And so I did. Not a memoir, not a tell-all, just a small journal filled with quiet memories, old recipes, letters I never sent, truths I needed to put down in ink. I didn't need the world to know every detail. I just needed to reclaim them for myself. The fire had come. It burned everything that was false. And in the ashes, I found balance, not the kind that comes from winning, but from finally standing on even ground. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment at the edge of town. Not the kind with luxury finishes or a view, just enough space to breathe. A balcony, a quiet hallway, the hum of my own peace. I painted the walls a warm cream and lined the windowsills with pots of rosemary, lavender, and basil. I learned how to keep succulents alive. I learned how to keep myself alive. Mornings started with black coffee and the hum of a fan. I walked barefoot on cold tile and didn't flinch. I wrote, sometimes nonsense, sometimes memories, sometimes whole pages of silence just to see how quiet could feel. The kind of quiet that isn't empty but whole. I kept the curtains open. I stopped checking my phone for names that never meant safety. I bought myself a red dress, not silk, not flashy, just mine. I built boundaries like fences with locked gates. Emotional boundaries, no calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Financial boundaries, new accounts, frozen access. Passwords I didn't write down. Legal boundaries, documentation of everything, stored and protected. I told Emma she didn't have to call unless she wanted to. She called anyway, every Sunday. Sometimes we talked about tea, sometimes about what healing looks like when you've never seen it modeled. She laughed more now. She said she was learning how to exhale. Jason sent me a copy of his book. I didn't read it right away. I let it sit on my shelf, spine untouched, like a closed chapter I was still deciding whether to revisit. One Thursday, while pruning a dried rosemary stem, I got a letter. Handwritten envelope. Unknown return address. Inside, a note on thick paper. Claire, you don't know me, but I've known about you for a long time. My name is Rachel. I think we share a father. I read it twice before sitting down. He told my mother he had another daughter, years ago. He never gave her name, only said she was light in a house of shadows. When I saw your name in that article, something pulled at me. I've spent the past month looking for the courage to reach out. I hope this isn't too much. I'd like to meet you, if you want. Rachel. I stared at the handwriting, looped, careful, so unlike the blunt, hard words I'd grown used to. I didn't cry, not immediately. I let the words settle. I let hope return in slow, cautious beats. We met in a park 2 weeks later. She was taller than me, freckles on her nose, eyes like Dad's. We hugged without needing to speak. That's the strange thing about pain. It makes you recognize your people without a single word. We sat in the grass. She told me about her mother, her job at the library, the cat she'd rescued that refused to be held. I told her about the wine, the lies, the fire that came after. She didn't flinch. You don't sound bitter, she said. I'm not, I answered. Just clear. She nodded. Clarity's expensive. We spent the afternoon in a field full of wildflowers. No cameras, no reporters, just us. The way families should begin, honestly. On the walk back to her car, she stopped and turned to me. Do you want to come to my place sometime? She asked. I'd like that. When I got home, I pulled the red dress from the back of the closet. I tried it on. It fit, not perfectly, but truthfully. It hugged the shape I was now, not who I used to be. I looked in the mirror, not to criticize, just to see. They had written me out of the story. Quietly, consistently, without a single page torn. They had told their version enough times to make me question mine. But I had found my pen, and I wrote myself back in. I saw myself now not as a victim or even a survivor, but as the author, the editor, the one who chooses which scenes stay and which are cut. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd find strength in solitude, that I'd reclaim my name without apology, I would have laughed. I thought healing would look like triumph. But it looks like this, A plant that doesn't die in winter. A woman who answers only to her own voice. A story that ends without needing to be rewritten again. Not perfect, but whole. I stood on the balcony as the sun dipped below the roofs, dressed in red, arms wrapped around myself, not from cold, but completion. I wasn't waiting to be seen. I had already arrived.